Did you know there was once a Hollywood performer so quick on her feet that some claim she could tap out over 500 beats a minute? It sounds like a record-breaking feat straight from a movie set, but it was the incredible reality of Ann Miller, a star who danced her way through the golden age of film. While you might remember Ann's luminous smile and seemingly unstoppable feet gliding across elaborate sound stages, there's a deeper tale lurking behind the sparkles and camera lights. She carried family secrets, engaged in behind-the-scenes struggles with studio executives, and even played matchmaker for one of Hollywood's most famous couples. This isn't just a story of glitz and glamour. This is a story about an unstoppable dancer who refused to let personal challenges, hidden truths, and an unrelenting work schedule dim her spirit. And what you're about to discover goes beyond anything you might have heard in old gossip columns. So how did this Texas-born tap phenom become the envy of Broadway, the brightest spotlight at RKO, and a social companion to titans like Hermes Pan and Lucille Ball? And did she really hide a secret about her true age for years, fooling nearly everyone except a trusted few? This is the Ann Miller few people knew, and by the time we're done, you just might see her in a light you've never imagined. Because behind the clicking heels and cinematic illusions lies a life story that's just as dramatic as any Hollywood script. Except this time, there's no retake and no second cut. Ready to dive in? Let's begin with the spark that ignited the unstoppable fire in Ann Miller's dancing soul.
Hello. Hi, sweetie. Am I late?
No, early.
Oh, that's great.
Long before she dazzled audiences, Johnny Lucille Collier, later known by the stage name Ann Miller, was already on a journey paved with big dreams. Born in Houston, Texas, the future star started moving her feet almost as soon as she could walk, discovering an undeniable passion for music and rhythm. Depending on which documents you read, her birth date can vary. Some say 1922, others cite 1923, and Ann herself sometimes claimed 1919 when it suited her professional narrative. But what's clear is that from an early age, she was hungry to dance, to dazzle, and to break free from anything that might hold her back. Legend has it that Ann's father disappeared from her life when she was very young, leaving her mother Clara to raise her as a single parent. Financial struggles were constant, so every ounce of stability came from her mother's unwavering belief in Ann's talent. With this silent pact in place, it became a common refrain in the Collier household. Dance was not just a pastime, it was a lifeline. But there was one major catch. To get serious work in Hollywood, Ann needed to be older, a lot older. At around 13 or 14, she was already tall, with a stage presence more commanding than many seasoned performers. She slipped on high heels, stuffed her dress for more curves, and added layers of makeup to pass for 18. It wasn't just about playing pretend. It was about survival in an industry that was notoriously dismissive of minors, especially if they aimed for big girl roles. Producers were strict about child labor laws, and a girl who was barely a teenager couldn't sign the kind of lucrative contracts that studios reserved for adults. So, Ann learned to skillfully navigate the studio system. If asked her age, she'd smile confidently and declare herself 18, again and again, year after year, until she actually hit 18. Few people suspected anything was off, given her towering height and sophisticated manner. Of course, a small circle at RKO, including stars like Ginger Rogers and Lucille Ball, knew the truth but kept silent. Why spoil the secret if it meant losing a dynamic new performer who could spin circles around more experienced dancers? Yet this hidden age was more than just a curiosity. It shaped Ann's daily life. She had to conduct herself with poise and maturity, never letting the giggle of a teenager slip out on set. Even her personal relationships were tinged with caution. Revealing that she was a mere high schooler could have jeopardized her dream. So from day one, Ann Miller lived in a self-constructed world, balancing adult responsibilities and childlike wonder, hoping that the gamble she was taking would pay off. Little did she know, her calculated risk was about to collide with the unstoppable force of someone who would prove instrumental in launching her career, Lucille Ball. Every Hollywood success story seems to have that one magical turning point when the stars align. For Ann Miller, it came courtesy of the fiery redhead who would later become America's beloved comedy queen. Back in the mid-1930s, Lucille Ball was hardly the household name she'd become in the 1950s, but she was already making strides in show business. She had an eye for talent, especially in those early days at RKO, where she was steadily rising from Goldwyn Girls ensemble parts to comedic leads. When Lucy spotted the long-legged teen dancing in a supper club, she saw raw talent and unstoppable energy. She reportedly pulled some strings, insisting that the executives at RKO give Ann a screen test. It was exactly the break Ann needed. Suddenly, the ambitious Texan was up on a studio stage, performing for directors and producers who were eager to find the next big musical star. She dazzled them with her dancing prowess, tapping at speeds that left even the most jaded dance coaches shaking their heads in disbelief. But Lucy's involvement went beyond simply opening the door. She gave Ann pointers about comedic timing and camera angles, basically offering the kind of supportive camaraderie you'd expect from an older sister. It didn't hurt that Lucy was well-liked by many on the lot, which meant her endorsement carried real weight. RKO soon took the plunge, offering Ann a contract. The only hitch was that Ann had to maintain her carefully cultivated persona of a woman at least 5 years older than she really was. As Lucy also recognized, illusions were part of the game in Hollywood, and you never told a story that could ruin your brand. From that day on, Lucy and Ann formed a friendly bond. It wasn't just about passing on comedic wisdom. Lucy made sure to keep Ann's secret under wraps. In an industry famous for backstabbing and leaks, that level of loyalty was a gift. Their paths would cross again, most notably in a film that would also introduce Lucy to her future husband, Desi Arnaz. But even in these early encounters, Lucy was an unofficial mentor. Who could have predicted that the 13-year-old trying so hard to be 18 would go on to star in legendary musicals, with Lucy cheering from the sidelines? Yet in a business built on illusions, it was comforting for Ann to have a guardian angel who recognized her worth before the rest of the world caught on.
Shaking the blues away, unhappy news away. If you were blue, it's
Behind every child star, there's often a parent working tirelessly in the background. For Ann Miller, that parent was her mother, Clara. While some whispered the dreaded term stage mother, Ann saw Clara as a steady rock of encouragement and care. She wasn't orchestrating elaborate behind-the-scenes power plays. Instead, Clara was more like a personal nurse, tutor, chauffeur, and life coach rolled into one. Every morning, she'd wake Ann from bed before dawn, load her into the car, and head straight to the RKO studios to make it in time for the 5:30 a.m. makeup call. In those days, being a contract player was no joke. Studios demanded rigorous schedules, especially for a rising dance star, whose numbers required hour after hour of rehearsal. Yet thanks to her mother, Ann never had to worry about the small details that could derail a long day. If her feet throbbed from incessant tapping on concrete floors, Clara would be standing by with a tub of hot water and Epsom salts. If the lines for a scene proved tricky, Clara was the perfect rehearsal partner. Where other parents might meddle in casting decisions or push for bigger roles, Clara took a gentler approach, letting Ann's talent speak for itself. This support extended far beyond the camera's glare. When Ann came home frustrated from an especially grueling day of shooting, Clara would remind her of the bigger dream that had carried them from a broken family situation in Texas to the bright lights of Hollywood. That unwavering positivity helped Ann keep her spirits high, even when the studio system felt confining. It also offered an emotional safety net during the times when Ann's hidden age weighed heavily on her mind. Only Clara fully understood the gravity of the charade her daughter was living, and she was determined to protect that secret at all costs. Though some might call it a sacrifice, Clara seemed to relish her behind-the-scenes role. She was never one to hover on set shouting directions. That would have hurt Ann's chances of being taken seriously by directors. Instead, Clara's quiet but consistent presence taught Ann the values of discipline, work ethic, and personal responsibility. The result was a star who, by the time she was a legal adult, had already mastered the complexities of Hollywood professional life. Perhaps that's the greatest testament to Clara's unwavering devotion. Without her, the persona of Ann Miller might have crumbled under the pressure of the big lights and big contracts. Instead, mother and daughter forged ahead together, an unbreakable team in a town where loyalty was often in short supply. Stepping onto the RKO lot as a newly minted contract player might have sounded like the best possible outcome for an aspiring dancer, except it came with drawbacks. Unlike the megastars who commanded lavish salaries, Anne started off earning a modest sum of around $150 a week. It wasn't chump change for an ordinary teenager in the 1930s, but it was hardly reflective of her rising star power. Nevertheless, for a young performer with a well-kept age secret, voicing salary complaints at that stage wasn't easy. Her strategy? Work harder, dance faster, and patiently wait for the big break that would demand a higher paycheck. That break came, unexpectedly, when none other than Frank Capra borrowed her from RKO for his film, You Can't Take It With You. At the time, Capra was already a household name in Hollywood, revered for his ability to churn out heartfelt, critically acclaimed movies. For Anne, it was like being offered a golden ticket out of anonymity, albeit in a minor role. Yet working for Capra meant exposure to a master craftsman who paid meticulous attention to his actors, from the biggest star down to the smallest supporting player. Unlike some directors who barked orders, Capra offered gentle guidance, whispering tips on set rather than announcing them over a loudspeaker. That environment gave Anne room to blossom. She absorbed not just dance instructions, but also how to interact seamlessly with other cast members, from the affable James Stewart to the shy but commanding Jean Arthur. Despite her small role, the movie would go on to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards, cementing Capra's status and offering Anne a golden bullet point on her resume. But ironically, back at RKO, her status didn't change overnight. The studio was still fixated on grooming big names like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, leaving a teenage Anne to accept whatever lesser parts came her way. Even so, she carried the Capra experience with her like a badge of honor. It wasn't simply the film credit, it was also a lesson in humility and the value of collaboration. On those long days when the ring of tapping shoes wore her down, she recalled Capra's quiet intensity, reminding herself that good work often comes from a sense of calm rather than frenzy. Yet the reality was that RKO's tight budget made negotiation for a dancer like Anne an uphill battle. On top of that, as a teen adult, she couldn't push too hard for fear of revealing her real age. The precarious balance threatened to tip at any moment, so in a calculated move that would shape her next step, Anne found another avenue, the stage. And that's where George White's scandals would transform her life and catapult her to a new tier of fame. By the late 1930s, the lure of Broadway was almost irresistible for a young performer who wanted to prove she could do more than serve as a background dancer in Hollywood musicals. Anne's agents convinced RKO to release her from her long-term contract, enabling her to strut her talents in George White's Scandals of 1939. The show was a high-profile revue. Think lavish sets, glitzy costumes, and a rotating door of musical vignettes that tested a performer's versatility. For someone who thrived on big music and bigger dance numbers, it was a match made in theatrical heaven. Stepping onto a Broadway stage was a different world from the cloistered environment of a film set. There was no concept of multiple takes, fancy editing, or retouching. It was pure, unfiltered performance, demanded live every single night in front of an audience that expected to be wowed. For Anne, who was not quite old enough to drink legally but was passing herself off as a seasoned adult, this was a trial by fire. She thrived under the pressure. Audiences were blown away by her conga numbers, jaw-dropping tap routines, and the radiant stage presence that belied her youthful age. Critics took note, praising her for injecting fresh energy into an already popular production. Newspaper headlines splashed her image across front pages, describing the new dance sensation who seemed to be unstoppable on her feet. That success rippled back to Hollywood. Suddenly, Anne's name was on the lips of producers who had overlooked her at RKO, dismissing her as merely another contract dancer with some comedic cameos. Now she was the it girl with a proven box office draw on Broadway. And with that newfound fame came something even more critical: bargaining power. When she eventually returned to Tinseltown, she did so on her own terms, commanding a significantly higher weekly rate than the measly $150 she had once been forced to accept. Yet George White's scandals wasn't just a game changer financially. It gave Anne a crash course in stage presence. If a dancer can nail it night after night in front of a live crowd, a Hollywood soundstage almost feels simple in comparison. The stamina, the discipline, and the unswerving ability to recover from any mishap became invaluable assets she took back to the studios. Even more importantly, the show stoked her confidence. She proved to herself and to everyone watching that she could carry major dance numbers on her shoulders. Once the run ended, she was no longer a wide-eyed Texan trying to make it in the big leagues. She was a Broadway darling with a suite of rave reviews. That momentum would follow her straight into her next film project, one that would unexpectedly link her fate with Lucille Ball once again. One name frequently comes up when discussing iconic dance in the golden age of Hollywood: Hermes Pan. While Fred Astaire was the on-camera genius with an unbeatable sense of rhythm and style, Hermes Pan was the choreography wizard working behind the scenes. Pan's ability to craft intricate dance sequences put him at the top of the industry's go-to list for musicals, and it was in the hallowed halls of RKO that Pan first set eyes on Ann Miller, an encounter that would spark a friendship lasting decades. From the moment Hermes Pan saw her tap, he knew there was something electric about this young woman who could keep pace with, and sometimes outdo, more established dancers. He became her mentor, teaching her how to polish her moves without losing that raw speed and excitement that made her stand out. In fact, Pan was so fond of Anne that he even took her to the Academy Awards as his date, an incredible validation for a once teenager who had just recently been dancing in small roles. But it wasn't just about dancing. Pan introduced Anne to the refined side of Hollywood's social scene: glamorous parties, refined dinners, and an inner circle that included everyone from famed producers to stars like Fred Astaire himself. In many ways, Pan stepped in as a paternal figure at a time when Anne's actual father was absent from her life. Their bond transcended professional mentorship. While Pan may have initially believed Anne was an adult, he eventually caught wind of her real age. But like Lucy, he respected her story and kept her secret. Perhaps he recognized that Hollywood could be a harsh place for a minor, no matter how mature and talented she was. Under Pan's guidance, Anne honed her craft to a razor's edge. She began incorporating ever more complex routines that showcased not just her speed, but her elegance. He taught her the subtle difference between dancing for a live audience and performing for a camera lens that captures every slight movement. By studying Pan's collaborations with Fred Astaire, she learned how to exude grace and personality while hitting every beat precisely on time. When asked in later interviews about her most cherished Hollywood friendships, Anne never hesitated to mention Hermes Pan. She credited him with saving her from countless beginner mistakes and fanning the flames of her creative spark. Without him, she might have stayed stuck in the cycle of simply being the fastest pair of feet around. Instead, she evolved into a more nuanced performer, able to blend comedic timing, flirtatious charm, and athletic prowess into each dance number. Their collaboration was a subtle reminder that behind every glittering star, there's often an unsung hero guiding them toward the limelight. And in Anne's case, that unsung hero had the same fluid poise behind the scenes that Fred Astaire had in front of the camera. Of course, Anne didn't limit her star-studded connections to just Lucy or Hermes Pan. During her time at RKO, she crossed paths with one of Hollywood's fiercest icons, Katharine Hepburn. Hepburn, with her patrician airs and sharp wit, could be intimidating, yet she had an oddly nurturing side when she spotted genuine potential in younger talents. On the set of Stage Door, she famously insisted on a daily afternoon tea break as part of her contract, a request that forced the entire production to pause. Initially, this might have seemed like a diva move, But Anne saw firsthand that it wasn't merely about sipping tea. Hepburn valued the camaraderie and mental reset it provided during those long filming days. She would graciously offer tea and cookies to everyone on set, from directors to assistants. For Anne, those warm breaks in the middle of frantic rehearsals felt like a slice of heaven. So deeply did they affect her that she adopted a 4 p.m. tea ritual for the rest of her life. Then came the Marx Brothers, legends of comedy whose on-set antics were as unpredictable as their film scripts. Anne found herself in the middle of their madness while working on room service. If dancing across a polished set was nerve-wracking, try doing it while Harpo Marx was lurking, ready to drop his pants and honk his trademark horn for a joke. To a teenage Anne, it was both terrifying and hilarious. The Marx Brothers operated on pure comedic chaos. Groucho's sharp wit, Chico's zany banter, and Harpo's silent mischief made every filming day an adventure in surreal humor. In her earliest days at RKO, she'd watch from the sidelines as established stars and directors were reduced to fits of laughter or exasperation. Everyone had to be on their toes because no one knew what the Marx Brothers might do next. It was a crash course in comedic timing and the unpredictability of show business. Anne later recalled how she had to sprint across the set to avoid Harpo's pranks, a memory she recounted with equal parts amusement and mild horror. But beyond the clownery, it taught her adaptability. If she could handle the relentless improvisations of comedic legends, she could handle just about anything. Years later, when directors threw unexpected dance adjustments at her, Anne could roll with the changes, unflustered. Those experiences were the intangible education no studio contract could guarantee. Like a comedic fever dream, her time with the Marx Brothers proved that the show must go on, even if it means sidestepping a pant-dropping Harpo. After tasting Broadway success and forging powerful friendships, Anne found herself back at RKO for a film that would become a pivotal moment in Hollywood love lore, Too Many Girls. It was 1940, and the film boasted a lively cast, among them Lucille Ball and a then mostly unknown Desi Arnaz. The chemistry between Lucy and Desi would eventually reshape television history, but at the time, they were just two more contract players trying to make a splash in a fun, energetic musical. Anne's role in the entire Lucy-Desi dynamic was more critical than most fans realize. While some accounts vary, Anne often recounted how she was among the first to introduce Lucy to Desi, presciently remarking that they'd likely marry. Given her own keen sense of timing, on and off the dance floor, Anne might have picked up on the sparks that flew between the two. Although Lucy initially shrugged it off, it didn't take long for the pair to become inseparable. Their romance set the entire studio buzzing, overshadowing even the film's storyline at times. Lucy's comedic brilliance and Desi's musical flair were a match made in showbiz heaven. Anne found herself playing second fiddle to their real-life love story, but she didn't mind. Lucy had been a dear friend since discovering her, and Anne loved seeing her happy. Meanwhile, Anne's personal trajectory soared. Having returned from Broadway with a host of accolades, she no longer had to settle for a meager salary. In fact, her weekly pay rose to around $3,000, a sizable jump from her early days of scraping by. This time, RKO recognized that her name on a marquee could draw audiences, especially if they were promised a tap dance spectacle that defied logic. Filming Too Many Girls gave Anne a vantage point from which she could observe the swirling tides of Hollywood relationships. She'd see couples fall in and out of love under the spotlight, realize the tension between personal ambition and emotional needs, and note how a single film could catapult two relative unknowns into stardom. Yet for all the glitz around Lucy and Desi, Anne was forging her own identity. In a single leap, she had gone from teenage novelty act to leading musical performer. Her confidence was at an all-time high, her experience spanning stage and screen. And with Lucy's continuing support, she navigated the RKO system more smoothly than ever before. While Lucy and Desi embarked on a romantic adventure that would soon revolutionize television comedy, Anne marched forward in a dance-laden, cinematic journey that positioned her for future triumphs at other studios, including MGM, where she would eventually become one of their most dazzling tap queens. But her story wouldn't stop at just dancing. There was another aspect to Anne that few in the public realized: a spirituality tinged with mysterious beliefs, psychic inclinations, and a willingness to explore ideas well beyond Hollywood's usual orbit.
Darn hot, it's too darn hot. I'd like to coo with my baby tonight.
For many fans, Anne Miller was simply the glamorous brunette with never-ending legs and an infectious smile. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find that her interests extended far beyond the stage. One lesser-known aspect of Anne's life was her fascination with the mystical. Reports swirled of her believing in everything from psychic phenomena to possible UFO encounters. Whether these stories arose from her own comments or grew through rumor, they added an intriguing layer to an already vibrant persona. Anne occasionally dropped hints about feeling psychic energy, claiming she could predict future events or sense the emotional atmosphere in a room. Remember how she seemed to know Lucy and Desi would wind up together? She liked to joke in interviews that she had a knack for seeing the bigger picture before it unfolded. While many chalked it up to coincidence, some of her closer friends might say there was more to Anne's intuition than met the eye. It wasn't just the Lucy-Desi prediction. She claimed to have premonitions about her own career moves, guiding her away from certain projects and steering her toward more fortuitous ones. Later in life, she also spoke about angels, the afterlife, and spiritual guardians. Topics far removed from the polished Hollywood image of a star who got her start in raucous musicals. She was said to have read numerous books on esotericism and metaphysics. In an era where star secrets often involve clandestine affairs and behind-the-scenes feuds, Anne's spiritual convictions were refreshingly different, though still considered eccentric by some. These beliefs shaped the way she approached her final years in show business. She never feared reinvention, tackling stage revivals, Las Vegas shows, and even cameo appearances in unexpected movies. The aura of positivity and unstoppable energy she exuded on screen might have been anchored in part by a faith in something beyond the material world. Of course, not everyone in Hollywood embraced such ideas. Studios typically preferred stars who stuck to safer talking points. But Anne had enough clout later in her career to speak her mind without facing severe repercussions. She saw no harm in letting people know that she believed in angels or the power of positive thinking. If anything, it enhanced her brand in the eyes of fans who craved a star with depth. And for all the cynics out there, Anne's unwavering success stood as evidence that her worldview, whether cosmic or otherwise, wasn't doing her any harm. She'd carved out a space where she could be simultaneously glitzy, glamorous, and grounded in a universe that many of her peers found peculiar. Even as Anne danced into people's hearts, her private life wasn't always as seamless. Unlike some of her Hollywood contemporaries who concealed every romantic entanglement behind elaborate PR campaigns, Anne's marital ups and downs occasionally made the tabloids. She walked down the aisle multiple times, each marriage heralding a new beginning that unfortunately ended in heartbreak. The reasons varied. Some cited irreconcilable differences, while rumors hinted at deeper emotional rifts. Yet each time her personal life took a blow, Anne returned to the stage or film set with renewed vigor, as if dancing was her way of healing. One of her more notable marriages was to millionaire Reese Milner. Their union seemed like the stuff of fairy tales at first. The star from humble beginnings marries into wealth, presumably living happily ever after. But the marriage ended in divorce, with whispers suggesting money or lifestyle clashes as potential causes. Another marriage ended after only a few months, fueling speculation that the unstoppable dancer might have been too independent to settle into the traditional role of a wife during the 1950s. Then there was her famously short marriage to the future television executive Arthur Cameron, again, a union that barely lasted a year. Hollywood watchers gossiped that Anne was too devoted to her craft, or that Cameron wanted a more domestic partner who would center her life around his needs. Truthfully, the specifics are hard to pin down. Each party had their own perspective, and the tabloids often exaggerated for sensational headlines. But the pattern was clear. Beneath the glamorous veneer, Anne struggled to find a lasting romantic partnership that fit her ambitions and her unstoppable energy. Her mother Clara remained her most steadfast companion throughout, offering quiet encouragement whenever marital storms blew in. Friends recall how Anne would process heartbreak by throwing herself into rigorous dance routines, sometimes perfecting a single tap sequence for hours on end. She rarely let personal sadness seep into her public appearances, preferring to keep her personal life backstage. On set, she was the consummate professional, smiling, delivering lines, and tapping her heart out as though nothing was amiss. This resilience garnered a newfound respect among her peers. Though she may have been labeled unlucky in love, she was far from broken. Dancing had always been her first love, and no marital discord could quell that flame. Her personal struggles might have shaped her perspective, but they never stole her spirit. If anything, they seemed to sharpen her resolve to remain an iconic, fiercely independent figure in show business.
Go, girl, go!
By the 1950s and early 60s, Anne Miller had become synonymous with energetic, high-kicking tap numbers. She sashayed her way through MGM musicals like Easter Parade and On the Town, sharing the screen with legends such as Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire. Her signature style, characterized by mile-long legs, sky-high heels, and an unrelenting rhythm, left an indelible mark on the genre. But as the golden age of Hollywood musicals started to wane, Anne did what she'd always done: adapt. She took on nightclub engagements, stage revivals, and even comedic appearances on TV, where she could display a flair for timing that went beyond dance steps. Rumors continued to swirl about her real birth year, with some claiming she shaved off a few years, while others insisted she might have been older than she let on. The speculation became something of an inside joke among fans, who watched the star age with the timeless grace of someone who seemed to defy the calendar. Whether she was born in 1919 or 1923, no one could deny the physical prowess she maintained well into middle age. Tabloids occasionally printed stories that she wore elaborate wigs or even had her hairline adjusted to maintain her youthful look. Anne took it all in stride. If her illusions added to her mystique, she wasn't about to protest. In later years, she embraced more flamboyant fashions and public appearances, further fueling stories of her eccentricities. Some claim she had entire rooms in her home dedicated to angel figurines or spiritual artifacts. Others insisted she refused to let visitors leave until she'd read their fortunes. True or not, these rumors only solidified her status as an irresistible Hollywood personality. Larger than life, not just on screen, but in every facet of her existence. By the 1970s and 80s, she was still hitting the stage for productions like Sugar Babies on Broadway, proving she could still deliver that one-of-a-kind tap spectacle. Fans who saw her in these later roles marveled that her technique remained lightning fast, and her stage presence exuded the same unbridled joy as decades prior. Retirement for Anne Miller wasn't so much a clear endpoint as it was a gentle winding down. She never truly stopped being Anne Miller, the star with the unstoppable legs. Even as she appeared in cameo roles or special TV features in her later years, audiences continued to be captivated by the same question. How in the world could she still move like that? Anne Miller's journey encapsulates the essence of old Hollywood, a mix of dazzling spectacle, backstage complexity, and the tenacity of a performer who refused to be confined by her time or circumstances. From the very beginning, she was forging her own path, dancing her way out of a challenging family life, lying about her age just to seize the opportunities she rightly deserved, and forging friendships with titans like Lucille Ball, Ginger Rogers, and Hermes Pan. In a town often driven by vanity and short-term fame, Anne chose to treat every phase of her career as a grand performance, never dropping her unwavering commitment to the craft she loved. Yet it wasn't just her dancing that made her legendary. It was the stories swirling around her, spiritual beliefs, rumored UFO sightings, and a heartfelt admiration for angels that added color to her life's tapestry. Beneath the glittering costumes and the thunderous tap sequences lay a woman unafraid to explore deeper questions, from matters of the heart to questions of the soul. Her personal struggles, including a string of short-lived marriages, never broke her spirit. Instead, she harnessed her pain and directed it into the fiery passion of her performances. And so we come to the finale. Ann Miller left this world in 2004, but her influence endures. Watch any classic musical featuring her, and you'll witness the same unstoppable energy that first caught Lucille Ball's eye in a supper club when Ann was just 13. She remains a blueprint for every performer who learns to strike a balance between authenticity and the illusions that Hollywood, and perhaps even Broadway, demand. After all, show business has always been about creating magic, moments that temporarily suspend reality and whisk audiences into a realm of possibilities. Ann made that magic real every time she laced up her tap shoes. So did she really reach 500 taps per minute? Or was that another glittering piece of Hollywood lore? Maybe the precise number doesn't matter as much as the legacy she left behind. What do you think? Could anyone truly tap that fast? And do you believe the rumors about Ann's secret age and psychic abilities? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into Hollywood's golden age and beyond.